Okay, we are about to get underway. Check if this is working. Hopefully it is. If it's not, I'm gonna have a lot of problems. We are live, I believe, right before the start of one of the biggest Atomic chess matches of the year. If you don't follow Atomic, this will be a good time to start. If you do follow Atomic, you probably already know about this. I'm gonna check audio quality. If you don't follow Atomic, this will be a good time to start. If you do follow Atomic, you probably already know about this. Fan's a little loud. Other than that, not too bad. Sorry about any feedback you heard. What's up, Erdmunter? Erdmunder? Is that how you pronounce your name? I don't know. Anyway, the show will commence in about 5 minutes. We will see who shows up, who doesn't show up, who decides this isn't worth their time. Probably most people, because honestly, most people only play real chess. I don't blame them. Anyway, I guess we just get to chill for another 5 minutes or so. See if I can find an Atomic game to watch while we wait. Well, I missed that one. Let's see. Everything's half minute. That doesn't work too well for this. Unfortunately, I can't give good commentary. I'm gonna check one more time to make sure the sound's okay. I'm gonna check one to make sure the sound's okay. Yeah, if Grand Lapin or Posh Posh or really anyone was playing a longer game right now, it'd be fantastic, but nobody really wants to miss the upcoming match. See how many people are watching from Tipau's side. I guess we can go over some of the games from the last round while we're waiting for this to get underfoot. Kind of a quick game, but at the same time, I don't want a boring game. Not really too many options there. Maybe something like this. This is an extremely common opening. which I believe Tipau plays from the black side. This bishop e7 move. It's quite good in practice. However, there's a flaw with it. g5. Initially, this move was found by engines. And the whole idea behind bishop e7 was to get to play knight a6. But the problem is now we have knight b5, which Stockfish doesn't even notice as a good move at first. It shows it as bad. It's completely winning, however. This position is completely won for white, if white knows the theory. Knight g4 was what was played, takes, castles, 4. Now white's stuck. Now black's stuck. White's whole idea in these lines is to play knight to c7, and then knight to e8 after g6. If the h-pawn takes the g-pawn, well, he has ideas of coming in with the queen after maybe knight f5, maybe knight g6. Basically, this idea is objectively lost for white, even though it takes a while. What's up, Program Fox? Yeah, big shout outs and thanks to the Licha staff for being willing to put this stream up on the homepage. And it looks like we're underway. Okay, so LM Onubense got the first game as black. So for those of you who are new to Atomic, those of you just tuning in, black has a very hard time in Atomic. An extremely difficult time, to be completely honest. If black can get a draw, black's going to be super happy with that. It's not like normal chess where, okay, technically it's a draw if both players play perfectly. If both players play perfectly in Atomic, it's unclear what the result should be. So Tipau started out with knight h3. Very common line. h6, that's a standard move. The immediate knight a6 is a little strange. This is an odd line. Onubense, I think, is trying to catch Tipau off guard a little bit, maybe get him a little bit out of theory. As people are saying in the chat, this isn't really a well-known line. This isn't well rehearsed. So, Onubense could just be trying out an interesting novelty. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not. But in practice, as a surprise weapon, it's certainly worth a shot. So right now, black's immediate threat is knight b4. White's immediate threat is knight b5. Pretty simple, basic plans. White also has ideas like knight f4, knight g6, which looks very strong. He can play b4 to stop this knight. He doesn't really want to play a3, since after knight b4, he'd be forced to take, and then his knight would blow up, and his pawn would blow up. So he'd be losing a knight for a pawn, and he'd be wasting a move, since b4 would do that initially. Queen d3 is an interesting line. That's a pretty good choice. That looks very strong. So queen d3, threatening to come into g6, which would be checkmate. It's also threatening to come into c4, which you can't really avoid. But Tipau didn't opt for that. So, if queen c4, the queen would have been threatening to come to f7 and take on c7. Like this. Winning material. As it is, he can't do that. because of threats with the knight, and possibly there's some play by getting this rook on the c-file, by bringing the knight over, maybe by bringing the bishop over to play check. So instead he opted to bring the knight out. So now we've got this somewhat deadly knight. And it's tricky to see. It's very dangerous for black here. You don't want to have to move your king like this. Black has very few pieces out. This is certainly strong for white. I'd be surprised if there wasn't a win. But there might not be one. No, this looks pretty much over. Yeah. So it looks like Onubense thinking pretty hard here. He's almost certainly objectively lost. Yeah, objectively, this is gone. So he tried out an interesting theoretical novelty, but it didn't work out, unfortunately for him. It led to a very short game. So this is what I was talking about when I said white had a huge advantage in this variant. Even a strong... I mean, these are arguably the two strongest players in the world at Atomic. We just saw a game that was going to end next move. I mean, mate in 12. Okay, so this is much more common. Bishop f4 is a little strange, but usually e6 first is the move order that's played by humans. Maybe the immediate knight a6 is okay, as people were commenting. Grand Lapin and Fast Tsunami, you can read in the chat, they're also exceptionally strong players. So their commentary is worth looking at too. So here I believe bishop g5 is a pretty good idea. I looked at this line before and it looks fairly strong. Maybe it's not quite winning, but it's very strong for white. White has other ideas though. Knight a3 is an idea. Bishop e4. Okay, here the idea is that black can't take. If black takes, we have queen h5, g6, and queen to e5. Yeah, that should be enough after the queen swap off, because we have check, c6, castle, and bring the rook in on the d file. Unless I miscalculated something there. But I believe this is all, these are all positions that have been analyzed. We'll see if he goes for that line that I thought he was going for. Not entirely positive. Okay, so the immediate knight a3. Oh, that's better. Okay. So now, after... Now, knight b5, yeah. Now after queen h5, g6, queen e3, I mean queen e5 takes, you just have castles queenside. But Anu didn't opt for that. Maybe he didn't like queen d6. He'd be up a pawn there. Maybe it wouldn't be... Maybe he feels this is more. It certainly looks stronger. Keep in mind that this d-pawn cannot be taken. If it's taken, queens would swap off in normal chess, but here, white would just take black's queen and blow up black's king. GG. So Tipau, obviously seeing that, can't allow that to happen. So he has to find some way to deal with this d-pawn push. He's opted for c6. Probably what he's planning to do is, if Onubense plays d6, he'll play queen b6, the queen swap off, and then bishop t7. Keep in mind that if white didn't play his queen here and instead played his pawn to d7 immediately check, black would have queen takes f2. So Onubense is trying to stop all of those ideas. Right now he's stopping queen b6 because the d-pawn can take the c-pawn. So he doesn't need to worry about that right now. Instead, he just needs to worry about making sure his position is solid enough that he can eventually get this d-pawn push in, or maybe trade off this d-pawn for an e-pawn and open up the d-file with a winning attack. Okay. Tipau opts for f5. This has a couple ideas behind it. First of all, you're gaining central space. That's a fairly common idea in normal chess as well. Bring out an f or c pawn to try to undermine the pawn center. Additionally, now the knight is threatening to come into f6. Once the knight really couldn't have come into f6 before because of knight g5. If this pawn was on f7, black wouldn't really have had any other way to deal with it than to take the knight and blow up his own knight, so he'd have lost a pawn there. But now that f4 has happened, it's much trickier. Much trickier for white. Still, white has an extremely good position. He's got great control of the whole queen side, and he's contesting the king side. His development is better than black. h4. Okay, so white pretty obviously had to stop. Oops, queen h4 as an idea. You opted to do that with h4. Now, rook takes, and this should be game because queen f6 is the only way to stop it. He takes. Queen takes. I mean, bishop takes here. There's no way to stop the queen. Really. Black castled queen side. We just have queen f5 and then bring the queen in to deliver a checkmate or blow up the king somehow. So it looks like both players are taking a short break. In this match, breaks of around 10 minutes are allowed between every 2 games. The reason for this is you can prepare some pretty forcing and difficult lines with white, so both players have to have time to adapt. Otherwise, one player could repeatedly play the same line, and the other player didn't know it. That'd be the whole match. This way, they're given a little bit of time to prepare and try to shore up any holes they might have had in the previous line. So while we're waiting, see if we can do some analysis on those 2 games. Okay, so as you can see, 3 inaccuracies from Onubense. It's a very accurate game, and 36 cent upon loss. That's because any small mistake is much more costly than in normal chess. Let's go through a couple of moves here, see what's going on. Pretty standard. Bishop e5 is a cool move. A couple of different options. Prying open the d-file wasn't the option I was initially looking at, but it works. It might be better than the option I was looking at. Okay. Knight a3. Tipau played bishop takes. The engine thinks that bishop d6 was better. But this is a tricky move to see from a human point of view. Tipau didn't really want to go for something like this, even though the engine suggests that there's compensation. Very tricky to see all of these moves and to see that this is okay for black, maybe. Even now, it looks very bad for black. So, a very difficult line to see. Bishop takes a3 was definitely the natural move. I'm not sure if it was the right move. It might have been the right move, but it might not have been. d5 now is strong. I'm not sure if it's the strongest move. As I was saying, there were ideas like queen here, 6, queen to here, queen f6, but oops, queen to here, queen f6. I'm not entirely sure if those ideas were the strongest. Again, white would be winning a pawn. Maybe it's not objectively as strong as this line though with the d pawn push. This is a much more positional, less materialistic way to play it. f5, g3. g3 was an interesting move. I understand it. It's to keep the queen out, prevent any ideas of queen h4 in the future. Just a slow, what are you gonna do kind of move. Engines obviously don't like those lines. But that's life. You can't play like engines all the time. So I'm gonna ask in the chat. Somebody brought up that there are buffering issues. Is anyone else having big buffering issues or lag? I don't know. If people are having problems with lag, it's probably best to get this fixed immediately. I did a quick test a minute ago and there wasn't any, but things could have changed. So f4, as I said, black has some options here. Black's doing okay. Rook g1 takes g3. It made sense, but it wasn't that great. Maybe better was just to continue playing positionally rather than grabbing the material. Here, white now has, as we saw in the game, a ton of options tactically. h4, g6 was probably wrong. g6 was definitely wrong. Leads to a mate in 6. So the engine recommends e5, queen f3, bishop h3, takes, knight f6. Rook takes. And now, after queen f6, you can see that white can't take this e-pawn. It's always kind of tricky to find in a blitz game, but okay. No buffering issues. That is fantastic. So if we follow this line through, just to get a short preview, white's gonna force the queen trade. Gonna play rook to g1 at some point, probably immediately. The engine recommends b takes c6, but a human would probably play rook g1 and then rook g7 or rook g8 to force a trade of rooks, since this endgame is winning for white, 2 pawns versus a piece. Maybe we'll have some time to look at the other game. Not sure. It's a tricky game. So bishop g5. It looks like Onubense didn't look at bishop g5 too much objectively, and he just got caught a little off guard. Okay, we're actually going to quit that since the next game has started. Tipau once again with white. Looking for a win, Onubense looking for a draw. Well, looking for a win, but it seems unlikely. Okay, so knight c3. This is all standard theory so far. a6. a little bit uncommon. It's not a bad move. B5 is the more common line. Queen d3 lines are very common. Instead of playing e4, they're very popular and fashionable, but at the top level, they're not the best try, probably, for a win. Used to be thought early on that they were close to winning, but now we've realized that black has some chances. Additionally, Onubense is a huge fan of those lines, so he probably knows them exceptionally well. So something some of you might have noticed is that we're getting very different lines than you're probably used to seeing if you play Atomic at lower levels. With lower levels of Atomic, you generally see very sharp, tactical forcing lines from white. Things like 1 knight f3 or 1 e3. In these lines with d4 and knight h3, knight h3, h6, d4, e6, or d4, d5. These are all very positional lines. They're still exceptionally sharp, but they're less difficult to memorize. The tactics, there are just so many options. You can't memorize all the tactics. You have to be able to find them on the fly. So it's unsurprising that many top players prefer playing this way. It's harder for their opponent to just learn all the lines and learn a good defense against. Certainly better at beating down us lower level players. So here, it's important to note that white can't take this queen because of knight g4 and queen takes. If that were to happen, I guess he could do that. It just wouldn't be that great. There's no reason for him to sack a pawn here. Doesn't have to. So white's threatening ideas now like knight d5 or d5. As we saw in the previous game, the d-pawn push is very strong. Onubense is trying to get rid of that knight at basically any cost. Here, if white took the knight, we'd have seen knight g5. So obviously Tipau can't take the queen. Now he's threatening to take the queen with his queen though. Play queen f6. Queen takes d4. After he plays something like knight g5 and h5. Tricky for white, but objectively I think it's pretty good. So a couple people are asking exactly what the thought behind queen e4 is. It just ties down white's position a lot. Ties down the queen to prevent it from doing anything really too strong. Black's queen can still technically move, but white's queen is stuck. Can only really trade. If it played queen g2, well, that'd be a good game. So white's now threatening knight g5 is exceptionally strong. It would force king d8 because if he took here, this f pawn would be taken by the queen, and that'd be a good game. White's also threatening ideas like, again, knight d5 seems pretty strong. d5 is pretty strong, but I don't think that'll be played. So Onubense took the knight off because he ruled knight d5, probably to be too strong. Makes sense. Knight g5, king d8 is almost certainly the line that's going to ensue. It's not terrible. It's lost, but as far as lost positions go, it could be worse. Because here, if knight takes, we have rook f8. All sorts of funny business ensues. Knight takes on e6. We have ideas with bishop h3. And bishop g2 is threatened. We're g1. Yeah, black has some compensation here. Keep in mind that Tipau can't really move the queen, but he doesn't need to, because if black took queen right now, black's queen would blow up. d4, threatening d6, which would be pretty bad. If he played d6 the move before, he had an extra move. d7 was just killer. Now it's a little less so. It's still super dangerous though. Yeah, and this is objectively loss for black. Yeah. This should be game. Mate, next move. e4, it looks like we're going to have a positional series, which is always cool. So we'll see if we get bishop e5 again. Bishop c1. I did not expect that. So there are two things that could be going on. The first thing is that could be a mouse slip. The second thing is that this is some brilliant prep with knight f4. It's an odd mouse slip to make. So I'm going to pray. Yeah, Onubense is still moving quickly. So I think this might still be theory. He might have prepped this out. It's a strange idea though. This isn't normal. Seen some very interesting novelties. So if white takes black's bishop now, you have ideas with knight c5 coming in pretty quickly, knight b3 coming in pretty quickly, or knight a4. So you could block those with b3, but then you'd still have ideas of the knight coming in here. It wouldn't be too great. Taking the knight's probably not recommended. Black could also just leave it there. So I'm expecting at some point, maybe b5, threatening to win material. That looks strong here. Maybe e5 is also an idea. Bishop c1 was so strange. This looks very strong. Black has ideas like, I don't even know if he wants to move the b pawn to b6. Apparently he does. So. Yeah, I'm not sure if that was his best move. I think it might have been better just to leave the b pawn, since if it was still on b5, it would be able to prevent this with, well, maybe it wouldn't, because then if he takes c, we'd have queen a5, queen b6, b3, f takes e4, queen takes queen. Yeah. Maybe this is forced. It's a very good play from Tipau. I think the novelty of bishop c1 has been pretty well dealt with, honestly. Not exactly a hard novelty to deal with, at least most of the time. But still a novelty nonetheless, and at this level, any novelty is a cool novelty. Far too many theoretical lines played. So black didn't really want to take the a pawn immediately. He did. There were threats of knight a4, and the knight was hopping into the position. It would be extremely annoying. So even though white was winning a rook, his pieces are so discoordinated that a knight in here would probably be able to win back a rook at least. Not more. Being said, it doesn't appear to mind it here. Right, okay. So a5, a4, a5 was because if knight a4, we have bishop takes on e7. The knight couldn't move out of the way, keep in mind, because the king was on g8 and it would have taken the rook. Opening up the d-file, this is advantageous to white. Just for right now. Since he gets there first. Tricky to see exactly how he'll win, though. White is certainly for choice. Bishop e2, good. Extremely strong. Bishop f8 might have been an idea. Knight d5 looks strong now. Okay, bishop f8 now. Knight d5 still looks strong. This looks strong too. Keep in mind, this rook is basically dead. Effectively, when you've been exchange, now he's just gonna sack. Interesting. Bishop d6 was odd. I was surprised by that. I thought he'd just keep the rook locked in and try to. Huh. Yeah, if he'd played rook, maybe that wasn't winning. It looked exceptionally strong though. This still looks interesting choice. So we now have a good endgame, which is somewhat of a treat. As you may have seen by the previous games, white wins a lot of these. Now bishop c. Okay. Bishop c7. Expecting that to move sooner. So this is probably... Maybe it's... Yep, draw. So white's a full bishop up here. But even though he's got a full bishop, the bishop's worthless. All black has to do is trade pawns. So that was a very strong game. Let's look at those two games. Quick. Okay. E6. This all seemed fairly standard. The engine liked c6 better than knight c6, but knight c6 doesn't seem too bad. Maybe knight d7 was the idea there. Didn't think black had gone too wrong here. Yeah, it was bishop takes c3. It was an odd move. Maybe queen takes f3 was right. I mean, the queen pin seemed to be bad, and black went here. See, knight g5, f takes. Yeah, there's some play along this f file at the very least. Maybe dropping the bishop back could be an idea. 5. I don't know. There's some play here, which is also ideas of knight takes d5 at some point, maybe. Not right now, because first of all it's pinned. Second of all, c3 and rook to the d file would be killer. But yeah, this looks better than what was played in game. Knight g5, king d8, takes, f8, d5, exceptionally strong. I thought rook f8 was the right move. The engine preferred king e8. Wow. Apparently the d file was just so strong for white that he had to get off at him immediately. I mean, that was somewhat insane. Not surprised Onubense didn't see that one. Okay, so e4. Line was popularized by, well, popularized a long time ago. Trojan Knight played it, but a player called TKC, or is it TCK? Played it a ton back on FICS. Was one of the first players I really saw doing well with this line and pushing it. Not bishop c1. I don't believe this has ever been played before. We look in the opening explorer. This has been played several times. Bishop c1. That's a new one. We have a3. So white's still doing okay here. e5, knight e7. Takes d4. As I said, e6 was a blunder. Maybe just something like e5. I don't think white can really afford to let this knight into c5. So I did think white had a bit of an advantage here, and it looks like the engine agrees. Bishop b5. Wow. Not a very human line to see, to say the least. But it makes sense. This knight is pinned to this other knight. Bishop b5, take the c pawn. It makes sense. C takes d. I thought this was still good for white. Rook d1. Check. Show. I thought this was exceptionally strong for white. I guess what might have happened is Onubense missed that after rook d1, rook d2, he's forced to take and drop his knight as well. That might have been what happened. Still seems odd though. Maybe he miscalculated something along the lines of, no, 95 doesn't work. Doesn't work for multiple reasons. I was thinking he might have calculated something like takes, rook, takes, and then bringing the knight back. Oops. And then realized that unfortunately black has this move, but I don't know. Some miscalculation occurred. White certainly had a large edge right now, and he let that slide, unfortunately. Maybe it was better to play rook d6? I don't know. Very nice defense from Tipau. I guess one other idea that white had might have been play knight here, since on knight c5 you can just take the bishop back and try and push this pawn, push the h pawn, takes this pawn, but even then all black has to do is sack off, since all his pawns are on light squares right now. And as we ended up seeing in the game, that bishop can't really do anything. Still a very strong showing from both our players. Let's get back to the match. For those of you who are just tuning in, by the way, this is the Atomic World Championship, the final round. Tipau playing the two knights. Very strong. e5. e5. This line is technically okay for black. Very difficult though. Black really has to know what's going on. This line is exceptionally difficult to face, and sorry, Grandmaster Arca 50 played this against Onubense in the previous line. Very controversial series of games. 6, good. Very strong so far. It looks like theory. Yeah, this is exceptionally strong for white. Black's gotta have an idea. Like, it would be knight a6, knight b4, but I'm not sure if that's even fast enough. Rook f1, basically forced. Tipau, still in opening theory. Yeah. So Tipau is just planning to win all his games with white if at all possible and win the match because he's already got the draw he needs as black. So his hope is to just keep things solid, whereas Onubense really needs a draw with black. Better yet, a win with black. And he's still got, well, even if he loses this, he's still got 2 black games to do it. So there's definitely time, but it's going to be very tricky. Tipau certainly has an advantage in this match right now. 3.5, 2.5. King f8. It's an interesting one. I believe rook g1 is right here. d5 is also interesting. Yeah, so for anyone not aware, again, this is the World Championship of Atomic. It's between Tipau and Onubense. These are the 2 finalists. These 2 have played countless times over the years. Been playing for basically a decade at this point in Atomic. And it goes back and forth. Both are very similar in strength. I think a lot of this is going to come down to who has had the better prep. So d5, a good move. Difficult for black to find anything now. So white, first of all, is threatening. d6. So black has to take that off. Keep in mind that Onubense, not only does he have a worse position right now, one that may objectively be lost here, he's also really far down on time. Like queen b6, bishop d3, even that doesn't do anything. The immediate knight c6, maybe that's a try? I don't know. Very difficult here for black. Queen b6, bishop d3 I'm expecting. Oh. Yeah, he's going to try sacking. So generally, 3 pieces for a queen isn't that bad for black. The problem here, yeah, is that White's not forced to take. And even if he did take, it'd be very difficult. I mean, Black's pieces are horribly uncoordinated. White's attack is coming in strong. If you're gonna sack the queen, you need to have active pieces, and Onubense just didn't. Onubense really needs a win right now. Otherwise, he's going to be down far too many points in this tournament. Bishop c1. Very interesting move. So for anyone who hasn't been keeping count, the current score is, I believe, 3.5, 1.5. However, Onubense has white, so we'll almost certainly be able to score at least half a point. This game is really hoping he can score a full point, though, since it's going to be exceptionally difficult for him to win with Black to catch back up. So f4 is a pretty standard idea in these lines. Rook g1 again. Last time we saw f takes g3, which the computer didn't really like. There were other options though, but I don't know if Tipau really analyzed this position too much. Probably is just going, yeah, with knight f6, that's the engine's first choice. I believe, if I'm recalling correctly. I'm surprised Anu is opting to repeat the line. It's a very risky thing to do here because, as I said, White has such a strong initiative, but it's unclear if Black can actually defend. There's certainly enough to make it exceptionally difficult in practice for White to get a win, even if it is a forced win, which I'm not convinced of. Some players are, but jury's still out for me. So Black's basic plan, knight f2 is an option. Knight f2 is probably what he's going to go with. F3 had to be played, basically. Nothing else could do to avoid the mate except for take the f-pawn. He really didn't want to get rid of his nice knight on g5. Knight takes h2 is an option right now. Black, but I'm not sure if he wants to do it. It's a very strong knight on f2. Wouldn't think he'd want to, yeah, he wouldn't want to trade it off. Knight f7. This is looking pretty strong for Black, honestly. I think Tipau has the edge in this match. So Onubense would really like to be able to get rid of this bishop. But he can't. He can't just take it because his queen will blow up. If he takes this queen, he's losing a ton of material for the queen. He's losing pawn, a knight, a rook, another pawn, another knight. I mean, it's basically queen versus the world. He plays that. 1 second. Excuse me. Alright. So b3 doesn't come as too much of a surprise to me. White really doesn't want to lose all his pieces. So if you just have bishop takes bishop, pawn takes queen, that's probably still okay for white. Even though this knight is extremely strong and the queen's having trouble getting active. Bishop g2, again, rooks are stronger than bishops. Why not take a rook if you can? Seems like a fair enough idea. Pawn takes. Black's gonna get this rook if he wants it. He doesn't opt for it. Looks strong as well. All of his pieces are coming in to hunt white's king. He has to be careful though. The queen is extremely powerful in atomic. Far more so than in regular chess. Good. It's very dangerous for both sides. He didn't want to take off the knight, take off the bishop because of knight d3. So now white has queen h4 as an idea, yes. g5, queen h5, queen's still getting in. Even if the rook came over here to block, good. Strong from Anu. Chances are this is going to be a draw though, which Anu really didn't want. Queen f5? Okay, queen f6. That makes sense. Reading Grand Lapton's comments. Looks very dangerous. I believe it's still a draw. Oh! That changes things. Much stronger for white before that. Black's still got a draw there, so Tipau can't be too upset with the result of this game. Really nothing Onubense can do. So it's gonna be a draw. Onubense not wanting to admit it. Okay. Very exciting game there. Let's do a little bit of analysis on the previous two games. So in this game, Tipau played exceptionally well, as he has been doing this entire match. 5. Yeah. 96, as I said, was an idea. Onubense, for whatever reason, didn't opt to do that. Maybe he was afraid of knight b5 ideas similar to g6. Seems odd though, because this is a very common idea. g6 is also strong here. Maybe it's not the best though. f4 might even be an idea, honestly. As crazy as that looks. Yeah. I think Onubense just didn't prepare this move and played f takes g4. Isn't that great? As you may be able to see from this top game, I've played into this line. In certain positions, it's an okay way for black to play, but it's not great if you're having to do all this stuff. Chances are that's where his mistake was. If we look here, yeah, looking down at the graph, it looks like Tipau actually might have missed a couple wins. Bishop C1's an interesting novelty, but I'm not sure I really like it from Onubense. Knight G5, F3, Queen. B3. All seemed very sensible, to me at least. Jack. Takes. Yeah, there just wasn't enough for the queen to get in and actually win here. Being said, Knight D3, if we just look at this, Engine thinks was great. Takes. Am I just missing some idea here? Let me turn the engine on. I think I'm just missing something here. Knight D3, as I said. E2. Four. Oh, with the idea of bishop. Okay. Maybe? I don't know. So this might have been strong for Tipau, but it's tricky to see why. Maybe the idea was e5 and then bishop h3 or bishop g4 might have even been the idea. That looks strong. Give that a shot. Yeah, I think this was it. Threatening to fork. And if queen here. Yeah, this looks like it has to be the right way to go. Check. Oops. Knight f3. Just wins the queen. Apparently they're stronger. Oh, this is mating. King g3 or king f2. I mean, king f3 or king g3, and we just take the pawn and blow him up. That. We have this cool mate. So this looks like the right idea. Here. Although the engine says f4 is now an idea. Yeah, say what you will. It certainly wasn't free. Oops. Okay, so we've been watching Onubense's side so far. Let's watch from Tipau's side. for the remaining matches. Knight f3, f6, knight c3. Tipau's going for the same line. Makes sense. It's a very difficult line. Onubense struggled with it. Knight a6. Takes. Let's see what Onubense knows here. This isn't... Yeah, bishop b4. Doesn't seem like that great of a move. King f1? That's a neat move. I think it was a mouse slip, though. Maybe it's not. Often it's hard to tell in this game whether it was a mouse slip or a brilliancy. Okay, so what are the threats here? King h4 was a threat. Obviously that had to be parried, because the queen was threatening to take on f2, or even if the f-pawn moved, come into f2 and deliver checkmate. This is also a threat. Now we have knight 5 though. Maybe bishop e2, maybe bishop d2 on here. We have queen 2. Let's get rid of those arrows. Yeah, this doesn't look entirely like the best option for black here. To me, at least. However, with that being said, black doesn't look bad. Onubense really needs a win. For those of you who aren't keeping score, it's 4-1 right now, which means all Tipau needs is a draw and a win. There's some lines that are basically forced draws if white chooses to go for them. I don't think we'll see any of that. Considered horrible etiquette. But if Tipau were to win another game, theoretically something like that could happen. So technically, Onubense can afford to have one loss or 2 draws if he wants to go into tie breaks. This is extremely difficult for him now. I'm sorry, I said it was 4-1, it's 4-2. Still doesn't change what Tipau needs, and that Onubense has a huge mountain to climb to get back up. He needs to basically win these next 2 games. Or draw this, win with white, and draw his next game with black as well. Maybe Queen E7 was another option he could have tried. Probably what he's gonna do. Yeah, he's just trade off. Tipau's a pawn up. So Onubense really doesn't want everything to get traded off. Not only that, but Tipau also has H and G pawn push, which is terrible. So Onubense really has to play well. Resigns. Five two. So from here on out, Onubense has to win all 3 of his games. I don't believe we're going to see Bishop C1 again. I could be wrong. I was wrong. Really? Bishop C1 in a must-win situation. This one, I don't know. This seems like a very interesting choice for a must-win situation. I don't like it. I'm sorry if I'm being overly pessimistic, but it seems odd. Bishop b5, okay, makes sense. Knight c6, expected. Knight c5 is an idea here for black, because we play knight c5, d takes c5, queen, oops, queen, queen. If black gets something here, he can't block with the bishop because the pawn takes. So maybe knight c5 is an idea. So d5. Okay, knight c5, logical move. Bishop d7 makes sense. Trying to get the bishop out, get the c file maybe working. Yeah, knight c5 doesn't really work right now, but after e5, looking difficult. I don't get why Onubense keeps playing bishop c1. That's such an odd line to choose. Especially in these kinds of situations. Maybe he believed he figured out what he did wrong last game, but I don't know. It seems like you'd want to stay with what you're comfortable with, rather than trying to prepare sorts of new crazy stuff that's never really been tested. Especially against Tipau, who's a theory monster. Onubense is better at finding things over the board, but Tipau certainly has or this match maybe having a hard time even doing that, but traditionally Onubense has been better at finding things over the board, and Tipau has been better at preparing all sorts of bizarre stuff to just out prepare everyone. (5-2) right now. Again, Onubense has to win this if he wants to stay in the match. I mean, if he doesn't want to stay in the match, he can do whatever he wants. He can just leave now, go get a Coca-Cola. I don't know. Knight f4. Okay, that seems like a sensible move. Threatening the e-pawn here. Yes, it's losing material after queen c2, but you're getting a big positional advantage. I like Onubense better right now. I'm not sure if it's enough to win though, which is what Anu really needs. But I'd like to see more of these two play, but I'm not sure if we'll get that. Knight h, okay. Makes sense. Forcing g5 or g6, at which point we'll see knight g7 check. King f8 or d8. I believe we're going to see king d8. I'm not sure. The c file could open up after c4, which looks rather dangerous as well. Okay, b3 first. That makes sense. Stop the bishop from blocking the c file. Knight f. We get knight takes e6. 3 pawns for 2 pieces is kind of dangerous, but it should be better for the 3 pawns. In regular chess, for those of you who aren't used to atomic, be much better for the 2 pieces. However, you can't really capture anything without blowing up, so very difficult to get rid of those pawns in an endgame. Especially with black's king in the center. I think Onubense is going to have this. Well, this game, it's still a very much an uphill battle if Onubense wants to actually win the set. Interesting. I would have played e8 to queen and then rook e1, but this works too. Okay. So Tipau just says, you know what, I've had enough. I don't care. I'm going to resign on time, effectively. Which is fair enough in this position. Onubense is good enough to win this. Look. C3, it's funny. Serious. E5. C3. So the only 2 moves the engine has any problem with in this game, keep in mind, our opening theory. At least for Tipau. That's hilarious. So king f1 was prep. It's amazing. H takes, h4. Bishop a6 I thought was a little premature. I think this is where Onubense started to go wrong, and it appears the engine agrees. Hard to find a better line for black though. The engine recommends g5, but that's horrifying from a human point of view. D6, d5, maybe those are options. Hard to say for sure. Maybe even taking the knight was an option. painful position. Yeah, I think d5 was a good idea. Maybe bishop here takes. Maybe not. Maybe this. No, this. For some reason, I calculated this and then thought, bad. So this would be a neat trap to try. Granted, yeah, I think this is just lost for black now. So d5 doesn't even work because of bishop. So maybe g5 is needed. Takes doesn't work. Keep in mind. That's something for black at least. Takes, queen, black wins. Maybe g5 is the way to go. It's a very difficult position though, especially when low on time. Okay, so let's look at the previous game. Onubense 3 inaccuracies. Bishop c1, obviously the computer doesn't like. I don't really like it either. Castles, it's a very natural move. Takes f4. And a3, okay, that makes sense. Nor he fenced in his knight a little bit. Let's go through this game. e3. To make sure I don't miss it, I'm going to turn this back onto TV. So forgive me, it's going to take us a minute to get back. So knight a3 makes sense. So I thought white was doing well here. Maybe not. Maybe not. Well, this is why Tipau's in the finals and I am not. Castles. This looked okay for black. Engine seems to agree. 5 maybe. 6 maybe. So there are forced draws in Atomic. Oh, not here. I think bishop b5 first was necessary. I'm not sure if Tipau is going to go for one. Okay. e4. So Tipau actually played this a lot against grass. Knight c3. Bishop g5. Bishop g4 is a line now. d4. Knight a6. This is a very interesting line. So now things get hairy. Knight b4, again, standard. See, I believe you play e6 here. I believe e6 is the main move. No, I'm sorry, e5. e5. e5 is definitely the main move. e6 would lose after knight takes c7. Now, e5, knight takes c7, rook c8, c5 I believe is forced. I don't think c6 is that great. Knight check. And white's going to throw in a check at some point or another so that the queen doesn't have to swap off. But this is actually an very interesting line. After rook c1, instead of playing c3 immediately, we have bishop e5 check. e5. Okay, it's going as I expected. Bishop b5 immediately. That's a surprise. d6 takes. So take on c2. Good. Rook to d1 doesn't work because of bishop b4. King moves, and then bishop e2. The Onubense has... He's very underdeveloped, but he's got chances here. That's not to say Tipau doesn't, though. These are very, very sharp lines. Right now, it's exceptionally easy for either player to make a mistake. Tipau just doesn't want to be the first one. Mess up. Castle's queenside. Again, we have bishop b4. As I've already said, it's not quite as strong as on rook d1, which I believe I was talking about, but still a fine move. I believe... No, we don't have that. We have to have bishop d6. Yep. Okay, I miscalculated this. Castle's queenside. Yeah, this looks strong. Bishop d6. And then rook e1. Looks like enough. Expecting rook e1, unless I'm missing something. Good. But now there's nothing. No! Okay. Bishop b2. I was expecting bishop b2 there. Check. b1. So if we just look at that, I was expecting bishop b2. King b1 or c2. Bishop here. That was a try, but I guess after here, black's not doing too great. Designed, white is victorious. So black would be forced to take, this rook, for anyone who doesn't understand. And then we'd have knight takes bishop and rook e7. And that's going to be enough to mate. So well done to Tipau. I believe Anu had some good shots there. I didn't agree with king f8. Oh, he couldn't have played bishop b2. I'm foolish. Bishop b2 isn't a move. King's pinned. Okay, so